continue to explore alchemy on the path of the seeker. Today, we are looking at step 5, fermentation. This is probably my favorite step. I cannot think of this stage without the image of grapes being turned into wine coming into my mind. This stage in the Emerald Tablet is separate the earth from the fire, the subtle from the gross. Now, in Dennis William Huck's book, this step actually has two parts to the process. First is putrefaction. In putrefaction, the material is allowed to rot. During this stage, the material tends to produce a liquid-like substance. I'm sure all of us have encountered a piece of rotten fruit at some point, and it is always squishy. Just the other day, I found a rotten potato hidden in my pantry, and it had turned to liquid mush. Don't let that description fool you, though, because on the path of the seeker, this is what I call a plateau. After working diligently to move forward, no momentum is detected. This can be very discouraging. Underneath this apparent tranquility, the information and experiences from the last 4 levels of alchemy need to be integrated. The subconscious has been fed the information, and a natural process occurs where it is integrated into our psyche. Some may slide into the dull slumber of the unawakened. Yet, the dedicated seeker must persist even if, at the moment, they don't seem to be making any progress. Paul Foster explains, putrefaction is decomposition. Without it, no seed can multiply. Think of a compost for a garden. A compost is where you throw waste, banana peels, leftover vegetable scraps, and yard clippings all go into the compost. A little bit of manure can help it all along. The smell is awful, but after everything sits around and rots and heats up in the process, it produces beautiful soil. We will come back to this in a moment. Paul Foster Case explains, one must enter by the gate of blackness if one seeks to win the paradise of whiteness. This is the black phase of alchemy. He goes on to explain, putrefaction is the loss of the false interpretation of life, which is necessary in order for true interpretation to be found. Now that everything has been broken down into a liquid-like form, it's time for the actual fermentation to take place. To return to one of our metaphors, this is the point with grapes where yeast is added to help along the process of fermentation to make wine. Fermentation starts, D.W. Huck explains, with the inspiration of spiritual power from above that reanimates, energizes, enlightens the soul. He explains that the individual will have potent dreams or visions, out-of-body experiences, or paranormal encounters. This will give the person a glimpse of what is to come. All of this happens on the mental level. Alchemists call this experience the secret fire. As a result of this, the individual will become extremely inspired and creative. He describes a fermented person as becoming extremely alive and irrepressibly hopeful as their attention is turned from the mundane world to something much greater. He explains, the fermental light is always close at hand, and only the veil of assumptions of material reality needs to be lifted to see it. This fermental light comes from the secret fire within all of us. This is the light of inner images, or what Huck calls true imagination, as opposed to mere fantasy. Paul Foster Case equates fermentation to leaven. Leaven is the active ingredient in bread called yeast. It's the fermentation of the yeast that causes the bread to expand and rise. Case explains the use of imagery a little bit more clearly. The pain, the mystery, and limitation that we experience are due forms, or appearances, of mental imagery. When the images change, the forms change too. Then he says, when the leaven of the superconscious has been received through the suspension of mental chatter, this leaven begins to operate in the subconscious region. Mastery, Case explains, is gained through mental imagery. At this point, we have gone through an important transformation. We see that it is how we think, the mental images that we create, that affect our experience of the world. To return to the compost example, the bits and pieces of leftovers that we threw in there have broken down, producing a tremendous heat. At this point, you can use a shovel to stir it up a bit to make sure that all of it is broken down. On really hot days, you will see that greasy imprint of a heat signature just above the mound as you stir it. You can even use some of the beautiful black soil that you find at the bottom to fertilize your garden at this point. On our psychological and spiritual levels, however, the work is not quite done. The next stage involves going back to the example of the grapes being turned into wine. The next stage is distillation. I hope that you have enjoyed this video, and remember, if you're going through that plateau experience, it's okay. This process takes patience and diligence. It took me at least 3 years. With help and clear instruction from informational videos like this, hopefully it won't take you as long. May you have a wonderful day, brave soul.